Welcome to another House of Wisdom video, and today is not going to be so much a knife review as it is a story time. A story time and dealing with a problem with one of the products of Spyderco. And the story time is going to be about the Spyderco Lil Native. Once upon a time, Spyderco made a knife called the Paramilitary 2. It was one of their most popular models. And they did something wonderful to it. They made it even smaller and they called it the Para 3. The Para 2 never really sparked my imagination so much because it's so large, but they made the Para 3 with the 50-50 forward finger choil, and it was just the right size for my hand. And even there was a little bit of handle left over for my hand. And so they went the next step. They made even a smaller knife with the same idea, 50-50 forward finger choil, yet it's smaller so that there's not a lot of handle left over, so it's a perfect fit for my hand. And like the Paramilitary 2 and the Para 3, it has the famous Spyderco compression backlock. Really love that. So this was my perfect knife. And I made a video called the Spyderco Lil Native, the best knife except for one flaw. And that flaw was that this little part here, that when you put your finger there, it protects it from going onto the blade. The kick was a little bit big. And whenever you closed it, in the cutout recess for the compression lock, the kick would encroach about 2 or 3 millimeters, so that every time you close the knife, it would hit your hand and the knife would not close completely, but it would stay a few millimeters open, and then you had to have a second motion to completely close it. So it's very much like the Para 3 in many ways, in that it has the compression lock, it has a leaf-shaped blade, it has the spider hole, and it has this grippy G10 handle. But it is also like the Native in that it doesn't have the thumb ramp of the Para 3. It has a flat takeoff like the Native. Now the Native is in a back lock, and the Lil Native in its initial iteration has the compression lock. Later they'll be releasing a Lil Native that has a back lock, but for now it doesn't exist. So anyway, it doesn't have this place for your finger there, and the Para 3 is not only the only Spyderco knife that has it. The Dragonfly, the Delica, a number of other Spyderco knives have that thumb ramp, and it's kind of nice. It has a place to put your finger. But for whatever reason, they chose to make the Lil Native rather than the Para 4. Another knife that is very similar is the Spyderco S. As you can tell, these two knives are nearly identical inside. They both have the leaf-shaped blade, and they both have the compression lock. One thing that is very different about the Spyderco S is that its geometry was designed so that whenever you close the knife, I'll show it on this side, you close the knife, this 50-50 forward finger choil fits perfectly inside the cutout for the compression lock, just like a glove. And the finger kick is at the top of the cutout, and it just fits perfectly. We're going to contrast that with the Lil Native design. The Lil Native design, even though it's the same size, the kick placement is very different. Let me get these guys oriented the same. Okay, same size handle. As you can tell with the Spyderco S, they put the cutout for the compression lock release more forward than that. And what that resulted in was that whenever the kick comes up, it came exactly into the middle of the cutout, and so with the large kick, it would protrude into the space for the cutout about 2 to 3 millimeters. And so that was annoying for two reasons. First of all, every time the knife closed, it banged into your finger, and it hurt for a while. But more than hurt, it was just annoying. And the other thing was that it made closing the knife a two-step process. You would close it, it would hit your finger, it would stay open, and then you'd have to close it again. There were two possible solutions that I thought about this. Both included the first step, which was you take the normal Spyderco kick and you shave it down, but then your finger was going to be too close to the blade, so you had to do something about that. My first idea was that you would just take the beast and you would sharpen and sharpen and sharpen this part of the blade until you wore away about 2 or 3 millimeters this way. And so the shape of the blade would be a little bit flatter at its takeoff, but then have the normal blade shape at its end. And then I was talking to a guy that does knife modifications, the ApostleP, who is Rob Bixby, who lives in Auburn, Indiana, and he said, let me look at it. And he looked at it, and he thought a better solution would be make a small sharpening choil, because one of the problems was whenever you closed it, not only did the kick come into the cutout for the lock bar, but a little bit of the blade. So if you just put the kick down, the blade would actually cut your finger, and that wasn't good. So he recommended that we just make a little sharpening choil to get that blade out of the way and then lower the kick 2 or 3 millimeters. And so I sent it to him, and that's what he did. And I'm going to show you a before and after picture. Here is the blade before on the screen above, and then here is what we did below. We took some height off of the kick, we made a sharpening choil, and now it works just like a charm. You can just close it, and look, it does not protrude into the space there. It's completely flush, so it doesn't hit your finger anymore. So I think that was a great idea that the Apostle Paul Rob Bixby had. I'm going to be putting Rob Bixby's contact information. If you love the Lil Native like I do and want to get a modification like he did to mine, you can email him and he'd be glad to do it for you, I'm sure. So now's the part where I have a message for Eric Glesser, the designer of the knife. We knife reviewers tend to gripe a lot about knives, and you really can't make us happy. And in my marriage, I found that we have a rule: you can't complain about something unless you have a potential solution for the problem. Otherwise, it's just griping. And here are my 2 potential solutions and my message to Eric Glesser. My first message to Eric Glesser is, first of all, thank you for making smaller knives out of your popular designs. The Para-Thi was great, and it made the Para-2 smaller and more manageable, more EDC size, but the Lil Native went even further. So just thank you so much for making smaller knives out of your popular designs. And the second message is that there's 2 possible cures to this problem. First of all, whenever you make the Lil Native 2, just use the same geometry that you used on the Spyderco S. You guys already own the patent. Just put the geometry the same where you put the lock bar cutout a little bit further forward and everything will be fine. That's my first recommendation. If that isn't good for you though, my second recommendation is whenever you make the blade, just shave the kick down a little bit and make a sharpening choil. You can maintain the same beautiful blade shape as the Native and be consistent with your design of the blade shape, and yet it won't hit your finger whenever you close it. Well, that's the video for today. In your comments section, leave your comments about what did you think about the Apostle Paul Rob Bixby's solution to the problem that the Lil Native had. And like and subscribe if you haven't already. And we'll see you on the next House of Wisdom Knife Review video.